in the song, when you speak about sending Magen David and, sending positivity, I was in the reserves for 2 months during the war. I wasn't in Gaza. I was in Hebron. And like you said in the beginning, like everybody wanted to donate and everybody wanted to give. And it was really amazing. People wanted to give a lot of money. And so we had a lot of, gifts and barbecues and things like that, which was great. But we also got a lot of letters, and we would hang all of them up. And throughout my normal army service, I saved all the letters and pictures that I got.
That was Mitchell Hoenig, a former Chayal Boded or lone soldier in the IDF, discussing the song Dear David. I wrote that after October 7th, and it was inspired in part by Psalm 121. I'm Shep Rosenman. This is The Rest is Commentary, where we discuss songs inspired by the Psalms and what they inspired my guests. Mitchell and I discuss his experience as a lone soldier and reservist, the importance of writing letters, sending photos and drawings to soldiers to help them keep up their spirits, different perspectives on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict before and after October 7th, the complexities of protecting both Jewish and Arab residents in volatile neighborhoods, recognizing the humanity of soldiers and those they serve, going to funerals of too many friends, and what it means to be a prankster. To start off, let's listen to Dear David.
Dear David, I read your story in the paper. Almost 6,000 miles from home, taking risks, not playing it safer. I know you're lonely, but you're not alone. You asked for pictures, pictures of sunshine, pictures of smiles in the rain, children drawing stars of David on the sidewalk, people dancing in their pain. Dear David, can you put the horrors on the shelf? Can you stay safe and secure? Please take care of yourself. This conflict cannot easily be cured. You asked for pictures, pictures of sunshine, pictures of smiles in the rain, children drawing stars of David on the sidewalk, people dancing in their pain. My daughter posted video of a lonely soldier. You wore a helmet and fatigues that night. You smiled and said, be kind to each other. That's how we'll win this fight. Dear David, we're looking up towards the mountains from where our help will come. You're the hope where our answer begins. When light returns, our sorrow will be done. You asked for pictures, pictures of sunshine, pictures of smiles in the rain, children drawing stars of David on the sidewalk. People dancing in their pain. You asked for pictures, pictures of sunshine, pictures of smiles in the rain. Children drawing stars of David on the sidewalk. People dancing in their pain. Children drawing stars of David on the sidewalk. People dancing in their pain.
Hi, Mitchell. It's so good to see you. First of all, let me tell everybody who you are. Mitchell Hoenig is my guest today. He was born and raised in Los Angeles. After attending Jewish day school, he moved to Israel where he learned in yeshiva. That's a house of study. Yeshiva literally means sit, so you sit and learn all day. And then was drafted to the IDF and served in the paratroopers brigade for a year and a half. Mitchell is now studying pre-med at Ariel University in Israel. And most important for the context of my listeners, Mitchell is the eldest son of one of our dearest couple friends. And his dad is someone I've known since I was a little kid. He was one of the people I loved to get in trouble with. Thank you so much for joining me, Mitchell.
Thank you.
So, here's the question. Songwriters, poets, artists are tapping into, whether it's zeitgeist or the muse or messages from God. That's all we're doing. And when we are able to tap into them, whether we do a good job of it or not, it's still a gift. So I like to offer each of these songs that I'm writing in this song cycle as a gift to my guests in hopes that it inspires something in them. Questions, comments, commentary, love, loathing, hope, hatred. What, if anything, did Dear David inspire in you?
Firstly, I want to say I think it's a really interesting idea to write songs based on the Psalms, based on the Tehillim. You're going through all of them, right? And writing songs for each of them?
That's the plan.
Idea? Yeah. So the one that you chose for Dear David, 121, is one of my favorites. And I remember always, especially when I'm hiking and out in nature, because, it speaks about looking up to the heavens and looking around. And so I love being out in nature, and I try always just like look up, and I see like a whole new world. So when reading the lyrics and listening to the song, I see the connection to my own life in that I was a lone soldier. And still I do miluim, which is the reserve duty. And I see the connection to the people back home. I'm originally from Los Angeles. So, the 6,000 miles from home, people reading about me. But when I first listened to it, initially a few questions for you came up, which was what inspired you to write this? Meaning, specifically in the song, you say you asked for pictures of sunshine, pictures of smiles in the rain. Was that from a personal interaction, or was that more of a creative interpretation of what you feel people on the other side of the world, maybe soldiers, are feeling?
That's a great setup. I don't know that you know this, but you were the direct inspiration for this song, specifically because your parents, John and Danya Hoenig, organized a letter writing campaign to lone soldiers at the Happy Minyan on Pico in Los Angeles. And of course we came, and post October 7th, 6,000 miles away, you still want to do something. And somehow giving money doesn't necessarily feel like you're doing something, even though donation is a massive form of political action, in the same way that sitting and protesting is a form of political action. So we were all looking for something to do. And for me, my natural way of processing things is to write. It's to write music. I'm sure this will come up eventually later, but in the wake of your mom's, Shari's, your dad's, and my dear friend Ivan Wolkind's death, I've written 50 songs already, all somehow connected to or inspired by Ivan, whether they're called Ivan's Ska Groove or Ivan's HBC, which is Hollywood Beach Cafe Nigun, or Ivan's Okay or Ivan's Angry. I mean, these are all titles that if you scrolled through my iPhone, you'll see. Sometimes they're lyrics, sometimes they're melodies, sometimes they're grooves, but that's just the way I process things. I used to think of myself as a very intellectual songwriter. I'm like, okay, I'm going to write about this. And in fact, that was true very much so at the beginning of this song cycle process, because I'm using the Psalms as inspiration. But one of my friends pointed out to me that I'm going far afield from the Psalm. I'm not taking the Psalm lyrics and just regurgitating them and finding a pretty melody. So there's inspiration that comes there. And that's the piece where I feel like my person connects with something greater than myself, as I was saying before. After that thing the letter writing campaign that your parents organized, the Happy Minion, all of that became this. I ran into your mother at the grocery store. She told me you enlisted in the army. You hadn't felt connected there before this war, this land of milk and honey, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? We don't need to go through all the iterations, but that then connected with one other thing, if I can find it. Hold on.
What's up, guys? I'm going to try and talk as loud as I can on this Hummer so you can hear me. We're about to start on really difficult and complicated mission we're going down right now. I want you all to do something good, something nice. There's so much fear going around right now, so many bad videos, so much craziness. I want you guys to be somebody's light for the next 3-4 hours. Do something good. Pick a mitzvah you haven't done in some 30 days. Just go for it. I've been feeling all the love that you guys are sending me. I love you guys back. Can't wait to see you all. Be somebody's light, be somebody's smile, be somebody's laugh, tell a joke. We need it. Am Yisrael needs it. See you guys soon.
So after seeing that video, it reminded me of this other piece of information that we were given in the letter writing campaign. Send people pictures, draw things, tell them a funny story. And that really just opened it up for me. And in that sense, while I had to do a lot of scrivening and processing, the song wrote itself from all of these inputs, and was my way of saying, how can I contribute? And most important, how do I offer comfort to the lone soldiers, the Chayalim Bodidim, second, their families, and third, and this is not in order of priority, this is just I'm numbering, soldiers in general and their families in general. And it also offers non-Israeli soldiers and non-soldiers a way of doing something. Send them pictures, send them stories of love and light, doing a mitzvah, etc., etc. So that's the inspiration. I mean, the core inspiration was, how do I offer you comfort? And what you get is that complicated package of doing that.
That's really interesting. I mean, and now I see, from seeing the first iteration to seeing the final product and knowing the full story, I really see how it's come together. And in the song, when you speak about sending Magen David and, sending positivity, I was in the reserves for 2 months during the war. I wasn't in Gaza. I was in Hebron. And like you said in the beginning, like everybody wanted to donate and everybody wanted to give. And it was really amazing. People wanted to give a lot of money. And so we had a lot of, gifts and barbecues and things like that, which was great. But we also got a lot of letters, and we would hang all of them up. And throughout my normal army service, I saved all the letters and pictures that I got. And I might even have some with me now.
Do you have one that you remember well?
I mean, I just looked at one today, so I can show you.
Please.
So the first one I found just happens to be from my sister. And this is the one that I was thinking of because it's the one I saw today.
What's your sister's name?
My sister, Ella, makes and made a lot of drawings for me. I think one of them might even be up here at the top. The one up there.
She's very talented.
He is very talented. And this is the one that I was thinking of. And this was like more, yeah. So it says, "Yachad ninatzeach," which has become the motto of this war, essentially, which means together we will win. And so everywhere in Israel, on cars, on buildings, on billboards, it says, "Biyachad ninatzeach," together we will win. So I do have more from people that I did not previously know. They're somewhere hidden away in storage. But during the war, I remember looking at a drawing that was done by a school from New York. I'm not sure exactly which one. I don't remember. But they had put their phone number on it. And I sent them a message to tell them how much I enjoyed their picture and spoke a little with the teacher who then told the student.
Amazing. That's great. And do you remember how you felt when receiving this? I mean, I have other questions, but let's start there.
Yeah. Before the war, during my army service, I finished my official army service in June 2023. So right before the war. And during that period, it was not, our service did not feel as tangible as it does now. And now there's a very clear and present enemy. Day in and day out, you see the fruits of your labor. Whereas back then it was very monotonous and even boring sometimes, which is for sure what my parents wanted. And then people would tell us that, because nothing's happening, it means that you're doing a good job. It's hard to see that. Because no terrorists show up, it means that you're doing a good job. And I see it. But day in and day out, standing for 8 hours, watching a field or whatever, it can be frustrating. So when I would get these letters during my service of people from the other side of the world telling me, "We really appreciate what you're doing. We look up to you," and all that, you feel like a warm feeling of love and support. Now during the war, it's different. Like I said, I spent 2 months in Hebron, which is not Gaza. And so there's still that feeling of maybe I could be doing more because a lot of my friends were in Gaza. But still, it's very different now. And love and support from the letters has a magnifying effect. Not in the sense, or more in the sense of now we know the real importance of our service and what we're doing.
Can you expand on this idea that given where we are in the war right now, you understand the importance more? Walk me through what the arc of that was, because you understood what you were doing when you were in Hebron. You understood what you were doing then, but nonetheless, as you put it, watching a field for 8 hours in a day can get boring. But so how did you come to that shift in perspective? Is it a function of what's going on at the government level? Is it a function of what's going on in your life? All of these things?
So when I was in my normal service, my 1.5 years of service before the war started, I spent 4 months in Shechem, in Nablus, and then another 2 months in a place called Kornei Shomron, and then another 2 or 4 months on the northern border with Lebanon. And there it is very monotonous, and lack of attempted terrorist attacks really is a sign of success. And then when the war started, I wasn't in the reserves and I ended up volunteering. I wasn't in the reserves because I only did 1.5 years of service. So the rest of my unit was still in their mandatory service and were in Gaza. And so I couldn't go in with them. So I joined a random unit and ended up in Hebron. And so the shift for me happened, and I think for everybody, happened on October 7th on Simchat Torah when everything happened, and that you know, Kav Aza, which is the job of going to guard the border with Gaza, was always considered like a very boring job. I didn't have that in my service, but a lot of my friends had, 4 months on the Gaza border. And, there's some rockets sometimes, but even that, as we saw, just the presence of people being there or the lack of presence has a massive impact on the Jewish people and Israel and the world. So that place that was considered boring, call it whatever you want, the ignorance, the lack of actionable intelligence, whatever, ended up causing the death of a lot of very important and the death of a lot of people and the death and suffering, I would say, of a lot of people. And so being in Hebron, where I wasn't on the front lines necessarily, but I was in a place which it's been described as the most complex gizra, like area of service, or one of the most, because in the Shomron, in the West Bank or Judea and Samaria, there's 3 different types of areas. There's area A, B, and C. So one of them is under like Israeli control, complete Israeli control. One's under complete Palestinian control. And area B, I believe, is everybody. There's no like gates. So Hebron, you have Jews literally living next door to Arabs. And so we would be standing guard there, and you have people walking by, like, markets, but people going about their day, but in the end, who could just pull out a gun, pull out a knife and stab you, and they're walking 1 foot away from you, or you just look up and they're looking at you from their window. So that made me realize, first of all, how complex everything is, but also how just my presence in something like that, or my lack of presence, can impact the entire region's functionality.
Sure. So it must be really powerful to have that experience, because we think of soldiers, and, your sister did a great job of kind of outlining them, but yet even though they're outlined, they're clear individuals who are huddled in a group. And I think that we tend to think of soldiers as huddling in a group, and you forget the individual importance of each one, because as you are securing an area, you are making sure that other individuals are not coming to harm, or you're preventing, again, other individuals from causing harm. And it's really important to kind of, for me, to understand that dual nature. There's this collectivity and this individuality. And for me, the most impactful part of the individuality, I still make it a practice to read the names of soldiers who've been killed, who've been injured, because these are individuals doing that work that has an impact, as you said, not only to protect Israeli citizens, but often to protect, notwithstanding what the news says, Palestinian citizens and Arab-Israeli citizens. And all of that telescopes out to a world impact, as we've seen here. And to that end, I wanted to ask you if you want to talk about any of your friends. No pressure to do so.
This year, I've probably been to 10 funerals. And, before coming to Israel, before moving to Israel, I had never been to a funeral. Thank everybody in my family is healthy, and I have not had any funerals before I moved to Israel. And then when I got to Israel, I was in yeshiva learning, and I would just get calls all the time asking if I could come to make a minyan, to be part of the 10 people at a random funeral, because this person either didn't have family in Israel or something like that, and they needed 10 men to say Kaddish, to like say the prayer for remembering, or that is said during the mourning period. So I went to 3 or 4, and that was just very interesting how even like casual sometimes these funerals were on Simchat Torah on October 7th. Looked at my phone at night because it was a Chag, like Yom Tov, so I wasn't using my phone. And I knew that I wasn't in the army anymore, so I couldn't be called back. So I didn't check my phone. I looked at my phone and I saw a text from my old commander. And he said that one of my friends, Binyamin Lev, had been killed. Binyamin was 23 or 24, I believe, and he was from France. So he moved to Israel with his family. And then his family moved back to France and he stayed. And he was in a Chabad yeshiva for a few years learning. And then he went to the army. And it obviously came as a shock because, like I said, I hadn't been to a funeral of somebody that I was close to. But also, maybe it's the stupidity or ignorance of youth. But the few times that I did go out there and was in harm's way, you don't think that anything will actually happen to you. And so it was a real eye opener. So the text said, guys, I'm sorry to tell you, but Binyamin was shot and he passed away. And all the guys that got out of the army, whoever wants to go into Gaza with us, send me a text. Now it's real. Now it's real. And so I sent him a text because I know how the army works and I know that everything takes a lot of time and it's not a binding agreement. And I spoke to my parents and it was a very hard decision. But in the end, they kind of decided for me because the head commander said that he didn't want to take people back into Gaza that had been out of the army for a few months. So my decision was kind of made for me.
Mm-hmm. How did that make you feel?
Both relieved because I didn't have to make the decision. But over time, seeing my friends go in and out and knowing that it's a very tangible way of success, meaning going in and into Gaza, fighting and going out, knowing that we were getting or are getting closer every day to ending the war and getting the hostages back. And so Binyamin on October 7th, so the war started, 6:30 in the morning, they started shooting rockets. And my friends were in the West Bank doing guard duty and stuff like that. And the head commander, a guy named Moti, called everybody together and said, listen, there's terrorists in Israel and we need to go help them out down there because they really need help. But he couldn't just leave because the soldiers were guarding places in the West Bank and things could have started up there too. So he got his car, his 5-seater car, and he took 4 people. He took 4 of my friends, and including Binyamin, and they drove down there. They drove down to Kfar Aza. And one of the other people that was there ended up getting shot. And my best friend Gavriel, who is a medic, went to go help the guy that was shot. He kept pulling him behind cover, but he couldn't do it because, it's very heavy and you have your vest and everything. So Binyamin got out from behind cover to help my friend Gavriel hold the guy behind cover, and Binyamin was shot, and they were unsuccessful in saving him. He really died a hero's death, really saving the people of Kfar Aza. And yeah, I think we almost need him to remember.
He lived up to his name, Binyamin Lev, right? A strong heart. Wow. Do you want to share any other stories about Binyamin or any of your other friends?
Let's see. I have a lot of stories about everybody. I lost 2 very close friends from the war, Binyamin, and then more recently, my friend Gilad Boim. Gilad was Israeli from Karnei Shomron. He was also, I believe, 23. He was the nicest guy, really funny guy, and he was almost done with his army service. He wanted to go on and become a doctor. So he was also a medic, and a few months ago in Gaza, he was killed by friendly fire from a tank,
Aye.
along with several other people from my former Pluga company. I think it's what's the name? Stories about him. He was just a very funny, very kind person. I
Funny
have
as in jokester, or funny as in prankster, or quick-witted?
he was too good of a person to do pranks.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and anything that would harm another person, he wouldn't do.
Interesting. Your dad and I did a lot of pranks. I don't know what that says about us, but he's a pretty good person. I mean, in fact, he's so generous and smart, and he's the one who everyone goes to on Shabbat afternoon when they injure their kids, like to his detriment. Ivan, may he rest in peace. I loved this story that I think Johnny told at Ivan's funeral. Do you want to tell it?
Please.
Do you remember this one? So it's Shabbos afternoon. They're at, I don't know if they're at your house or they're at Ivan and Leah's house.
Wait, is this the story with the whiskey?
Yeah.
So I think it was on New Year's Eve. It was either on New Year's Eve or Thanksgiving. And I know because we have a picture. My mom showed me the picture a little bit. And like you said, everybody would come and knock on the door, and they needed stitches or anything like that. And we always would spend Thanksgiving and New Year's Eve with Ivan and his family, the Wolkines. And it could be, I think this is how the story goes, that Ivan had a few drinks at that time.
Yeah.
And somebody came knocking on the door. And like you said, my dad is an amazing person. And he also has trouble saying no, especially when people need help. But Ivan knew that my dad would want to leave and leave the meal. And so Ivan took a bottle of whiskey and poured it all over my dad and went to the person at the door and said, "Oh, you don't want him to do surgery on you. He's drunk. Look at him." He smelled like whiskey and everything. And
Oh, yeah. Oh, man. I'd love to get a copy of that. And by the way, that's that same sense of play that your friend Gilad seems to have had. Ivan was always so playful with your dad, and your dad is also, he loves that sense of play. He's always teasing, never hurting, but teasing. And I've seen what a good friend he is to his people. I'm not going to say any more than that.
I think that's a very important thing, in that I went to the army to protect the Jewish people, for sure. And I think that there's a basis for this in some Freudian psychology or Jungian psychology, which is that there has to be a, in quote, dark side to a person, but that means a part that is capable of violence, which then is used for the right purpose. And so the violence used for the wrong purpose on October 7th, which would have continued until every Jew in Israel and outside of Israel was killed if it weren't for good people that used that violent part of themselves for good. And I think it boils down even to, and especially to, play and joking and things like that in a person, when they can use that to elevate the fun that they're having from innocent fun, I guess, where everybody is instantly being uplifted, to ups and downs, I guess, which makes appreciate things more.
It reminds me of this. We heard this story. I was a troublemaker in elementary school and high school, and so I often got this parable. If you have a taste for blood, become a butcher, right? And that way it does not express itself in harming other human beings. If you have a taste for blood, become a soldier. And I was not a violent kid in school, but I was an instigator. I would be like I'd turn to Robert Spector and say, okay, red light, green light. And he would then begin the red light, green light process in the middle of class. Or I would say to Yossi Botnick, why don't you bring in your boombox and put in that tape of Led Zeppelin, but like start it at 15 minutes in. So there's 15 minutes of silence so that it just goes on 10 in the middle, and then lock your locker. Like I wouldn't do it. I would come up with these ideas and tell other people to do it. But all the teachers knew was me because, I'd gotten caught too many times in other things. No one was really harmed. It was disruptive by all these activities. And sure, I guess in retrospect, we were harmed by the lack of learning that was happening. But for many of us, especially people like me, there wasn't a lot of learning happening anyway in some of these classes. Let me ask you this. When you signed up for the Army, two-part question, and when you moved to Israel, did you have this perspective that you wanted to protect the Jewish people? Was that the impulse?
That was for sure. And then I initially wanted to go to the army, and I wasn't sure if I would stay in Israel because there's a lot of downsides to living in Israel. There's a lot of upsides, but there's also a lot of downsides. But when I was in yeshiva, it was Yom Yerushalayim, which is the day that we remember Jerusalem being liberated. And I had gone with my yeshiva to the Jerusalem Day parade in Jerusalem. And Hamas had started firing rockets. This was in 2021, I believe. Hamas had started firing rockets. And I was getting to the old city, and I remember vividly everybody was running and everybody was helping each other. And then that led to a few days of very intense rocket attacks. And I just remember telling myself, this is crazy, but I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. And I know during the war, it was very tough, going to funerals every day and all that. But I wouldn't want to be anywhere else, especially as a Jew.
Mm-hmm. Feel free not to answer this, but are there things you would have the government do differently in managing this war?
It's not necessarily what I would do, but something that I learned from my time in the army, but also from just being in Israel, is that this term of Western society and a Western perspective on the world is a thing. But people in the West don't think about the other perspectives. And here I've really had the opportunity to learn the Middle Eastern and especially Arab worldview, and from my perspective, meaning from what I've seen. And it's very different from the Western perspective in that Israel has been completely losing this PR war, as I'm sure you're aware of.
Yeah.
And that's something that needs to be taken into account. But if the Israeli government and army was not worried about already, meaning losing the PR war that they're already losing, and it was just an internal Middle Eastern conflict, I think this war would have been very differently, because what I've seen is the Arab worldview and view on conflict is one of strength. And this was one of those things that I came into with a different perspective, and then from experience and from speaking to other people, including Palestinians in their villages and, in Shechem, in Nablus, and in the villages around Karnei Shomron. It's really one that, it sounds bad to say it, but that the stronger guy wins and the stronger guy gets the more respect. And it's not something that the Western worldview really is ready to accept, that things are not necessarily, you see it in the Hamas negotiations. It's not about who is more rational and who is right. It's about who's going to hit harder.
Do we need to change that? If so, how?
I have no clue. It's just something that I've noticed. I came in with a different perspective, thinking that everybody really wants peace and all that. And then from speaking to Palestinians in the West Bank, the majority of them don't want peace with Israel. They want Israel to not exist. from everybody that I spoke to and from recent polls too. And it's very sad. It's very sad to see that. There was one guy that I spoke to who told me that if he could vote, he would vote for Ben Gvir, which was crazy. But what he did tell me, which was very interesting, was that he despises the Palestinian Authority. He says that they're all crooks and they steal all the money that goes to them. And there's no money for education and there's no schools. This was specifically in the village called Azun next to Karnei Shomron, where there our job was mostly to prevent teenagers from throwing like big like cinder blocks and boulders onto the highway, where, you know, a boulder hitting a car going 60 miles an hour kills everybody inside.
Sure.
So what this guy told me is that obviously he doesn't want his kids to get involved with this because it becomes dangerous for them and obviously for the Israelis that are being hit. But he said that there's no funding for schools, so these kids just go out and, like you said, have their own version of pranks, I guess, which just snowballs into bigger and bigger rocks.
Right. Do you have any Palestinian friends?
No, it just doesn't work like that. I can't, I don't know, unless it's somebody that goes out in search of that.
Have you ever participated? There are several groups, Seeds of Peace, and forget the name of this other group that's very, very impressive. It's a combination of a rabbi. Primary leaders are a rabbi who works in the West Bank, Yehuda Shomron, and a Palestinian leader who was a member of, I don't know if it was PLO or Hamas, and now they believe in engagement. Have you ever encountered people from those communities?
No, I haven't. In theory, I would be open to it. I don't know how much time I have.
Yeah, right now.
Yeah. My opinion is always changing on these things. You know, when I learn something new and interact with somebody new.
Our rabbi, Sharon Browse, I think is doing a fabulous job of both supporting Israel and calling for less grief and pain for the Palestinian people. There's lots to debate on the details, but I'm going to just leave it at the top level. What I keep telling her is that she's choosing hope. And I think that is like the most Jewish of things to do. You know, when we pray 3 times a day, when we say the grace after meals, and in a variety of other ways, we are asking for the coming of the Mashiach, the Messiah. And the way I think about it, and the way you think about it is different than the way my sister, Haredi Fredi, thinks about it, is different than the way some Chabad friends of mine think about it. But at the end of the day, Mashiach is a prayer for a hope that humanity can get along, that there's peace in Israel, that, God's promise of the land in peace, in abundance is fully realized. And so, my hope for you is that you continue to be successful and you have a great experience and build a great chevra for yourself, and that, you and your friends should know no more suffering. I know that that's a hard ask, but that doesn't mean we can't, pray for that. And unless there's something else you want to cover, I just want to thank you for a really engaging conversation and for your time.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting.
I'm so glad.
Thinking of inspirations from Dear David, and I'll update.
Amazing. Great. Maybe you'll write a song. I know you play guitar. Send it to me.
All right,
Mitchell. Thank you.
Of course.
Lots of love. Bye-bye. Thanks so much for listening. Special thanks to Mitchell Hoenig for joining me, to Ezra Fax and Eitan Rosenman for their help in producing this episode, to Jessica Chana Swedler for her help in promoting it, to Amy Spees, Diana Wade, Liz Hanlon, and Eitan Rosenman for their input when I wrote Dear David. You can find Dear David and all of the other songs in this song cycle on most platforms that stream or download music, including Spotify and Apple. You can also find a video on my channel of Dear David, edited by Ezra Fax on YouTube. In the next episode of The Rest is Commentary, my friend, Denver-based singer-songwriter Carolyn Schulman joins me. Inspired by the song Kissing My Son, which is based on Psalm 2, we discuss relationships between parent and child, ritual, what we know and think we know, God laughing, fearless songwriting, God's voice, and so much more. Please join us.